Hi, I'm ARCTIC-2050, and I invite you to join us in this insightful journey into the next 30 years of the Arctic. Let's discuss together what are the possible futures of the region. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Arctic 2050, the Mapping the Future of the Arctic Roundtable. This is a side event of the High North Dialogue 2021. And this roundtable is a collaborative effort of the Nord University Business School and Moscow School of Management SKOLKOVO with support of EY. My name is Alexei Kalinin, and I am honored to run this session for you today. As we all know, the Arctic development has significantly intensified in the recent years, but it's not only about the pace of development, but also it's about its complexity and interdependency. Obviously, there are so many factors such as environmental or social or political and business. And our roundtable aims at identification how business can grow in the Arctic without damaging its environment, how cities in the Arctic can grow and attract more talent, and what policies must be put in place to ensure the sustainable development of the Arctic. Our two schools, Nord University Business School and SKOLKOVO Business School, with great support from EY, we have conducted a research in cooperation with many experts from business, academia, NGOs, and public sectors, to come up with 4 narratives for the future of the Arctic until 2050. If you didn't have a chance to read the report, I invite you to download it using this QR code, or simply go to ARCTIC-2050.info. This roundtable was supposed to be a multi-stakeholder dialogue aimed at critically assessment of the proposed scenarios, analyzing threats and opportunities for economies, cities, local communities, and sketching the recommendations for the future leadership agenda for the more sustainable Arctic. Before we start, I would like to introduce our distinguished speakers. First of all, Mr. and Professor Frode Nielsen of the North University Business School. Dr. Alexander Middleton, Assistant Professor at Oulu Business School. Mr. Heidar Gudjonsson, Chairman of the Arctic Economic Council. His Excellency Nikolai Korchunov, Ambassador at Large of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia and Special Envoy on the Arctic. Ms. Polina Leon, Chief Sustainability Officer of Rosatom Group. Mr. Felix Tschudi, Chairman of the Tschudi Group. Mr. Kjell Stockvik, Director of the Center for High North Logistics. Mr. Tero Varuste, Regional Director for Europe at ICI, and also a Global Fellow at Woodrow Wilson Center. Mr. Jan Dusik, Sustainable Development and Governance Lead with WWF Arctic Program. And Anja Renali Konturi, International Affairs Manager, City of Oulu. I kindly ask all the speakers to observe the timing. We expect you to speak for no longer than 5 minutes so that we could have more time for Q&A session at the end of our discussion, of our roundtable. And one last thing for our participants. You are more than welcome to ask your questions. You can do it anytime. Just use our Zoom chat to ask your questions. Please introduce yourself, indicate who your question is going to, and well, I have to apologize in advance that we will not be able to take all the questions due to the time limits. But since you are introducing yourself, we will make sure that each of your questions reach out to the speaker, and probably we will be able to follow up after the session. And now I would like to pass the word to our first speaker, Professor Frode Nielsen from the North University Business School, who is going to give his welcoming address on behalf of all the co-authors of the Arctic 2050 report. Frode, the screen is yours. Thank you.
For this kind introduction. Mapping the future of the Arctic towards 2015 is a grand challenge. 30 years is quite a lot of time. But I must say, I remember quite well 30 years ago when I was living in the city of Tromsø. We had a visit from the brand new Soviet icebreaker Baygage on its maiden voyage to Murmansk. On that meeting, we discussed economic potentials, collaboration, possibilities, and it was pretty clear for everyone that icebreakers was the absolute precondition for a possibility to develop the economy and the potential of the Arctic. So the big question now is, what will the next 30 years bring? So we are lucky to have 9 discussions today that will give some perspective on this interesting and quite current topic. And I must say it is quite important to know here that the Arctic is not an unambiguous, clear term, but rather the opposite. First, the discussion of the Arctic should perhaps be divided in at least 2 geographical areas. We have the North American area, and then we have the European and Russian Arctic, which are very different in many, many ways. So the main principal difference between these two regions is the accessibility for human activity. While the North American Arctic, by and large, is covered with ice and snow, the European and Russian Arctic is increasingly ice-free, rather bigger parts of the year. A second principal difference between the two regions is that the European Russian Arctic holds vast natural resources, some renewable resources and some non-renewable resources, all which are increasingly more accessible. New technology combined with the daunting effect of the global warming has brought about totally new perspectives on the prospects for the European and Russian Arctic. So the situation that characterizes the future not only makes the region more accessible, but it also opens up for exploitation of natural resources that has been very difficult to develop earlier. Fish and other seafood products will increasingly spawn and prosper in the Arctic Sea area as the temperature increases. Aquaculture and development of the vast sea resources represents a huge challenge, but also a fantastic opportunity. Correspondingly, warmer sea areas will increasingly struggle with reproduction of important seafood species in other parts of the globe. This means that there will be possibly a displacement or a shift in the global food production ability. These shifts tend, like all shifts, major shifts, tend to be followed by tension among the actors involved. And this represents a quite interesting area as well that I hope can be touched upon during the discussion. So as the sea ice withdraws, the Arctic becomes far more accessible on a year-round basis. Transportation at sea will also thrive on this new situation. And one possible outcome is that the Northern Sea Route change its role from mainly being a regional transportation service within the Russia North to a major competitor to alternative transcontinental transportation routes between the Far East and Europe. A common denominator for this economic and social change is the notion of the blue economy. Basically, the blue economy can be defined by three key elements. It is, first of all, the harvesting and trade of marine living resources. The second is the extraction and the use of marine non-living resources. And the third is the commerce and trade on, in, and around the oceans, all within a sustainable way. Some important drivers here is the expected population growth on a global basis with around 30%, which is quite immense. This means an increase from 7.6 billion people to 9.8, almost 10 billion people on the globe. Significantly more food is needed. There will be significantly higher energy needs, and climate change challenges will inevitably alter the big game and adaptability. Most of the inhabitants on the globe will not live and settle in the Arctic, but probably, not to say most likely, they will have to rely on supplies and services from the European and Russian Arctic. So the big question here is how will this development affect the population structure and the cost of living in the Arctic region? How will the cost of doing business in the territory develop, considering the new potential and transportation infrastructure? And how will the development affect the former vast distances of the communities within the territory? Not only geographical distances, but also cultural distances and other issues. So the main reason for its persistent and growing topicality is related to the strategic position that has increased significantly over the past decades due to all these issues that I have just mentioned. Yet, another perspective derived hereof is the environmental concern and the concern for the current inhabitants. One of the key issues is the tug of war between the preservation of the Arctic as a nature reserve for those living further away from the Arctic, and those who see economic and social potential in developing the region. A critical matter here is the institutional framework that will govern the economic, social, and other kind of activities at the one hand, and the incentives at the other side. These are some of the key issues that has been the basis for the development of the scenario at hand, mapping the future Arctic towards 2050. Today, we are looking forward to hearing insightful and forward-looking thoughts, judgments, and suggestions for the future perspectives of the next 30 years. So thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Frode. And that was very inspirational. Thank you very much for such a comprehensive overview of all the possible factors that really affect the future of the Arctic. And I especially liked your notion of the blue economy, because I believe that most of the people in this virtual room would agree with you that the Arctic economy is all about the ocean economy, or blue economy, how it is called. And we will definitely be talking about it further on today. And now I would like to invite Dr. Middleton, who co-authored the report about the future scenarios, Arctic 2050, and she will give us an overview of those narratives and give so that we could be on the same page when we're going to be discussing it further down our discussion on this roundtable. Alexandra, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to our side event, and let me introduce you the summary of our report, Arctic 2050, Mapping the Future of the Arctic, which was developed in collaboration between Nord University and Skolkovo Moscow School of Management. This report is aimed at inspiring, guiding, and supporting policymakers, businesses, and NGO leaders, especially those in the Arctic states, in their search for sustainable future agenda of the Arctic. The Arctic region is undergoing serious transformations, such as disruptive challenges of climate change and shifting geopolitics. Scenarios provide some road markings for the future, and they are meant to help the leaders of today and tomorrow to navigate towards more sustainable Arctic. So let me walk you through this scenario methodology first. This included scoping, framing, building, and using scenarios for fostering dialogue and strategic thinking. When we think about 2050, it's probably the most difficult time horizon to think about, because it's between now and then, really far away future. We identified critical uncertainties in the Arctic and then chose the ones with the highest impact. This included the pace of climate change, with such factors as rising sea levels, melting ice and permafrost, infrastructure degradation, transformation of natural environment, and physical accessibility of resources and routes. We looked at economic development that are studied through intensifying race for the Arctic resources and pace of economic diversification and availability of freight traffic activities. We also looked at social development, such as demographic dynamics, changing labor migration patterns, indigenous peoples' urbanization, and increasing social disparities, or so-called Arctic paradox, whereby people of the Arctic don't reap the benefits of economic development taking place in the Arctic. We looked at quality of the institutional environment that included environmental policies and regulations, and public acceptance of doing business in the Arctic. Couple of few things that we also investigated is the pace of technology development and innovation, and also dynamics of geopolitics and international consensus. So in this slide, you can see that we combined desktop research with series of in-depth interviews. Altogether, we interviewed 22 NGOs, academia leaders, policymakers, and Arctic business community. So we mapped the key stakeholders that are driving the regional development today to better understand how they will change in different scenarios outcomes. So let's go to the next slide. Yes, okay. So now let's look at our 4 scenarios that we developed. They are inspired by key historical epochs. We evaluate how each scenario performs on social, environmental, and economic axes. In the first scenario, Dark Ages, the Arctic becomes depopulated and devastated industrial site for ruthless exploration of fossil resources. Environmental regulations are very weak. Natural habitat and the livelihoods of indigenous people deteriorate, and climate crisis takes its toll. As a result, Arctic economy remains only dominated by national states and large companies. The extractive industries prevail. So in this scenario, you see that all dimensions are underdeveloped: social, economic, and environmental. The next scenario is Age of Discovery. In this one, we have fierce competition for Arctic resources, and it's fueled by state-funded innovation, but there is only fragmented environmental regulation of the Arctic ecosystem is deteriorating. There is also growing militarization of the region, and some even call it the new Middle East because there could be conflict anytime. In this scenario, you see that economic dimension is prioritized all over others. The third one is romanticism. In this scenario, Arctic becomes the showcase for environmental protection. We have very stringent regulations and institutional settings. There's no extractive and mining industries. There's only sustainable energy and sustainable transport and tourism in the Arctic in this scenario. The Northern Sea Route is operated only by green vessels. But at the same time, there is no incentives for developing private industry. So the population declines, and the Arctic is only maintained as a National Geographic showcase of preserved environment. So in this scenario, obviously, it's environmental dimension that overplays all others. And the last scenario is Renaissance. In this scenario, the nations agreed to make exploration of the Arctic just as much as the space exploration symbol of national cooperation. The government agreed on standards of doing business in the Arctic, and they have support mechanisms and incentives for private business to do research and development. We have Arctic technological platform as valuable as Arctic ecosystems. The Arctic attracts new people and talent to be involved in these innovative decisions and innovative solutions. Arctic cities thrive, and economy is very diversified. So basically, in this last scenario, we have an outcome in which all 3 dimensions are equally important: social, environmental, and economic. So these scenarios inspire us to think about long-term solutions for the Arctic development that are respectful of nature, traditional livelihoods, and incorporate the latest technology and innovation advances. And I'm much looking forward to hearing your thoughts and insight on our report. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Alexandra. The colleagues, Dr. Middleton has just presented the gist of this research. Obviously, it's a pretty pretty thick book to read, so I strongly encourage you to do that. But at least for now, for this discussion, we are now on the same page about what those scenarios are and what our thinking was behind those scenarios. And now I would really like to open a discussion about the scenarios of the future for the Arctic and the future of the Arctic itself until 2050. And I would like to ask Mr. Heydar Gudjonsson, the chairman of the Arctic Economic Council, to give a start of this discussion. And my question to Mr. Gudjonsson is, Mr. Gudjonsson, would you call the Arctic an attractive business destination? And do you believe that business can grow in the Arctic without damaging the environment? So Mr. Gudjonsson, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Honored to be here with all of you, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, absolutely. It is a very attractive area to do business. But furthermore, it is helpful to the environment and to the world if more is done in the Arctic. The reason is simple. The challenge in the future is doing more with less. And in the Arctic, we have a proven long-term track record on exactly doing that. There is no area in the world that can boast of a better track record in oil and gas, in mining, in fishing, in basically a sustainable economic development. So I absolutely think that we should, of course, move industries from areas which have less track record, that cannot show responsible economic development, and into the Arctic, where we have exactly been doing very well. So what we will see in the future, as I believe, is that more and more new entrants will come to our area. We see that there are 2 billion people moving into the middle class in Southeast Asia over the next 10 years. And they basically lack the resources that we have in abundance in the Arctic. So if we look towards Southeast Asia, they're experts in building infrastructure. We saw Japan being the experts in the 90s, and then South Korea, and now China. And it doesn't come as a surprise that they are moving more and more activities to the Arctic. So to make sure that they behave as responsibly as we have done in the past, the Arctic Economic Council is championing the Arctic Investment Protocol, where we have basically 6 simple protocols, guidelines, that if you follow these guidelines, you will do business in the Arctic way, so to speak. You will do business in a responsible manner. So I'm very optimistic about the future of the Arctic. We have the resources, we have the track record, we have the opportunities, and we will see more interest coming our way.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gudjonsson. That was really inspiring, because what you are saying is that Arctic is very open to new entrants, to new businesses, but just as long as they comply with certain regulations, certain norms and standards that are essential for doing business in the Arctic sustainably. And I think that it's pretty fair, and maybe it's not only the Arctic specifics, perhaps in many other countries, people, when they invite new businesses to come and new investment to come, they want them to obey the certain rules and work up to the certain standards. And with this, I would like to pass the word to the business, actually, and I would like to invite Ms. Polina Leon from the Rosatom Group to share her thoughts about doing business in the Arctic. Because, well, actually, Rosatom is pretty famous globally as a nuclear power plant constructing company that builds nuclear power plants all around the world, not only only in Russia, but also in Europe and Asia. But perhaps not everyone is also aware that Rosatom operates the largest, if not the only, nuclear icebreaker fleet. And since recently, Rosatom has moved even further and became an infrastructure developer for the Northern Sea Route. So it's pretty big development that's happening in the company, and there are interesting prospects. So we would definitely like to hear from Rosatom and from Polina here today with us. What do you think about doing business in the Arctic? Is it any different from doing business in any other part of the world? And how you can guarantee that you do no harm to the environment and local communities and this fragile ecosystem? And what is even more important, what do you believe should be the policies and regulations put in place to make sure that your company and other companies can work in the Arctic sustainably? So please, the screen is yours. We're looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alexei. It's really a great pleasure to be part of today's discussion. And actually, you're absolutely right. Rosatom has the only nuclear icebreaker fleet in the world. So here we are. As answering your question, I believe that doing business in the Arctic has its absolutely essentials, because on the one hand, there are plenty of resources, but on the other, ecosystems of the Arctic are ultimately fragile. And of course, we need to keep in mind these geographical specifics. You know, of course, that ESG aspects are now become material for any international business all over the world. And doing business in Arctic is even more demanding in this regard. And this area probably has one of the most integrated ecosystems on the planet, which means anything that happens in the Arctic may cause dramatic changes far beyond the region, specifically in regard of climate change issues. The question is, what is the best pattern of responsible business behavior to ensure the sustainable Arctic development? So basically, ESG standards for business are focused on prevention of the negative impact in some specific area. But I'm not sure that such an approach would be enough to guarantee the long-term sustainability in the Arctic case. As you have mentioned, Rosatom Corporation is nominated by the Russian government to support cargo ships navigation and maritime port infrastructure development for the Northern Sea Route. And we believe we have to perform this activity in a way of sustainability leadership. What I mean, we would integrate ecological, climate, and social components into our business model and make ESG effects a part of our business performance results. Let me illustrate what I mean by the sustainability leadership on the example of our general business experience. As you have said, that our key products is nuclear power plants construction and clean energy supply. Our usual contract for nuclear power plant construction includes equipment supply, power plant construction, nuclear fuel supply, and personal training. But we consider our responsibility to be much wider. First of all, we understand the impact of the nuclear power plant project for human well-being. If we discover it through the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we see that we definitely contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals number 7, that is affordable and clean energy, and number 13, that is climate action. You see that common to units nuclear power plant secures electricity supply for about 2 million of households. And what is more important, nuclear energy has no CO2 direct emissions. That makes it as clean as wind and solar power. So the climate aspect is really important for us. Also, we create jobs. Let me give you some figures. On the construction phase, there are up to 10,000 people on the nuclear power plant side. And for the operation period, there are about 3,000 of employees. And we support their professional training, as most of them need to be high qualified. Developing infrastructure is also one of our priorities. For example, in Bangladesh, Rosatom has constructed a cargo terminal on the river. And also we were implemented coast protection works and consolidation of the riverbed. In Hungary, that we have another project, Rosatom is involved in reconstruction of railway road and in building bridge over the Danube River. In regard of environmental impact assessment, we have our mandatory responsibility to perform regular ecological monitoring and reporting and prevent any potential ecosystem damage. Together with this, Rosatom cares about local environment and biodiversity in details. Another example, when preparing the Hungary site, we have relocated 118 animals to secure them with appropriate wild nature conditions. In our project in Finland, we have waited for the frogs several months winter sleep to move them with comfort away from the construction territory. So that's quite a small effort, but we are focused to do this. As for our social responsibility, we understand the huge impact of our project on people's life, both for Rosatom employees who need to be relocated with their families from Russia to another country, and for locals whose moderate day-to-day living is disturbed by this huge construction project. We understand that we need to talk with local a lot, so usually we establish information centers. We organize some kind of cultural exchange and local dialogue. So we make Russian local cuisine days. We support joint summer campuses for Russian and local children on the scientific matters, and many other activities for a better understanding of local needs. All these, I would say, ESG leadership principles are explicitly determined in the Rosatom sustainability policy. And we are not only striving to follow these principles by ourselves, but would kindly ask our suppliers and subcontractors to join us. For example, for the Egypt project, we have elaborated a suppliers code to encourage the responsibility leadership throughout the supply chain. And of course, we are committed to engage all this sustainability mindset to the Rosatom performance in the Arctic. We understand very well that when performing large-scale infrastructure projects, we become an impact corporation, and we want to ensure our impact is positive. We hope that all our colleagues who take on doing business in Arctic would share our vision. And here we believe that it should be an ESG proactive business who drives development of a specific Arctic sustainability code as a basic regulatory frame for doing business in Arctic. Such a code would be applicable only if it is based on real business experience and involves best ESG practices. And to do this, we need to have a trusted dialogue with other businesses, governments, policymakers, NGOs, and academy to ensure their sustainable and prosperous Arctic future. So that is our vision.
Well, thank you very much, Paulina. Actually, I think that the sleeping frogs are unbeatable. So that's outstanding. I didn't know that you kind of
have plenty of such stories.
This kind of company could care of sleeping frogs. But anyway, on a serious note, I really like the fact that you link whatever you are doing with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is obviously important, and you have demonstrated the experience of doing business in sustainable way in many other parts of the world. And what I really liked is your idea of the Arctic Sustainable Business Code. I think it has a lot to do or a lot in common with the Arctic Investment Protocol that Mr. Gudjonsson mentioned. So perhaps you two could work together and invite more and more companies to join so that it could be a collaborative effort that would guideline other businesses into the Arctic. Arctic. Well, thank you very much again for your presentations, for the presentation and for the frogs especially. And now I would like to pass the word to Mr. Felix Chudi, chairman of the Chudi Group. And Chudi Group is one of the most important players in the Arctic logistics. And the general understanding is that logistics in the Arctic and shipping in the Arctic is getting easier since the climate change and ice melting. But probably it's not as simple as that. And I would really appreciate, Mr. Chudi, if you could share your thoughts and ideas about what's your prospects of the future of the business in the Arctic in general and logistics specifically. So please, the screen is yours. Mr. Chudi, you're on mute, I'm afraid.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good. Okay, things are not as easy as they look, or they might not even look that easy. So, but anyway, I'll give it a go. As we all know, the ever-given accident in the Suez Canal has brought attention to the Northern Sea route as an alternative transit route between the world's main oceans and markets. And I would like to try to outline a future scenario, which is not as long as yours till 2050. It is actually till about 2031, 10 years from now, which I think is in fact realistic if the circumstances so will. But I think it's important to keep the main arguments against the NSR in mind when I go through my scenario. These arguments are high cost of transportation, environmental damage, and the disappointing statistics regarding transits so far. By 2031, the perception of the NSR as an environmental threat has been turned into one of an environmental benefit. The fuel is mainly LNG with onboard carbon capture technology, collecting all emissions, including black carbon. LNG is bunkered at the eastern and western entrances of the NSR, as well as along the Siberian coast. The bunker vessels or bunker facilities are obliged by law to receive and dispose of the CO2 environmentally approved and verifiable ways. The LNG as fuel means there is no risk of oil pollution in connection with accidents. By 2031, the NSR is considered the most environmentally sound transportation route between East and West, combining a shorter route with zero emissions. The catalyst for this was a Russian federal program introduced in 2023, which financially incentivized low-emission NSR transits, while at the same time penalizing higher emission solutions. The discouraging statistics of NSR transits in the early 2020s changed direction from 2023, when the Russian regulations giving cargo preference to Russian flag and Russian-built vessels for Russian Arctic cargoes were lifted. This meant that international shipping companies invested in suitable tonnage alongside Russian owners to overcome the lack of ice-class vessels and thereby establish the critical mass required for a competitive freight market to function. This gave the confidence to cargo owners and resource project developers not to fear lack of transport capacity and the costly ordering of dedicated fleets for each new project when considering investments. So much for the 2031 NSR scenario. I would now like to move on to highlight another possible Arctic development towards 2050. The Arctic is a region where gas and clean energy meets minerals and metals. Its vast resources of natural gas and a great potential for renewable electricity from wind and hydro can be converted into blue and green hydrogen. By combining these input factors, the Arctic could become a platform for green industrial processing. Lack of green electrical power will be an issue also in the Arctic. One solution is the floating nuclear plant installed by Rosatom at Pevek. Other solutions can be extensive onshore and offshore wind farms based on the enormous wind resources of the region. In the medium term, low-emission semi-processed products combined with sustainable shipping solutions and short transportation routes to the main markets could turn the Arctic into one of the world's green solutions, rather than the opposite, as is sometimes argued. The above developments also benefit the local indigenous populations, which will gain access to competitive transport solutions for their produce. The new sustainable industrial activity will create the basis for retaining young people, which is the precondition for viable Arctic communities, whether indigenous or not. The aim must be to create livable and thriving Arctic societies while supplying the world with environmentally friendly products produced sustainable in a sustainable ways. One other precondition for this development is the availability of infrastructure, such as ports, being able to serve the developments inside and outside of Russia. In addition, north-south connections through the Russian river system or by railways, such as the Arctic Corridor project from Kirkenes through Finland to Europe, should be further developed to fully utilize the potential of the NSR. But of course, for all this to happen, we have to avoid the present geopolitical storms blocking the developments. And the governments have to create a conducive playing field, i.e. they have to give the right regulatory framework for these developments to take place. But as an eternal optimist and believer in Arctic exceptionalism, this is something the Arctic nations, not least Russia and Norway, have managed before and will manage again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schode. I really liked your shorter term scenario, and because of its pragmatism and realism, actually. And I fully agree with you, and I hope many people in this virtual room also agree with you that the alternative fuels and the development of a new ice class fleet will help to improve and increase the sustainable Arctic shipping traffic. And but obviously the point you've touched at the end of your presentation about the geopolitical context is very important. And I also hope that we can overcome all the current issues and build better Arctic for all.
But just one comment, and I think that is important in this picture, is there is a window of opportunity now, and that's why I'm talking about the 10-year scenario, because now there is a very, very small, I would say, legacy fleet built especially for the Northern Sea route, which means that there is an opening for building the right vessels and ordering the right vessels now and for the next few years, or because the moment you have a fleet which has been built and which are not built to these low emission standards, then it is much more costly to introduce the regulations which are requiring very low emissions. So it's really a window of opportunity for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes, absolutely. I fully agree with you. And on the geopolitical stance that you raised, I hope we will have His Excellency Nikolai Korshunov joining us later in the session today, and he will probably be able to shed some lights on the Russia's chairmanship in the Arctic Council and what Russia wants to achieve during this chairmanship. But for now, I would like to stick on this logistics and shipping perspective, and I would like to invite Mr. Kjell Stockwick, Director of the Center for High North Logistics, to share his views on what are the major challenges in the Arctic logistics for the next years, and perhaps you could refer to this 10-year scenario that Mr. Schode has just presented. So, Mr. Stockwick, the screen is yours, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us. And first of all, I have to congratulate our chair, Mr. Felix Schuli, with the appointment of the High North Hero yesterday. Well-deserved prize. And it's, of course, due to that, it's very difficult to go up against his scenarios. So We, of course, support his thinking. As you know, the blocking of the Suez Canal recently created a lot of attention along the Northern Sea route. And that's some scenarios you can look into in the future. What will happen if you have such incidents like that? What type of attention will that create? And we saw just after that, we got a lot of calls from businesses who was looking at the opportunity of going around the Northern Sea route. And I'm pretty sure my colleagues at Rosatom got the same. You mentioned some scenarios. We expect an increase, of course, of that, but we also see that we need to create a good and better logistics system. So at our centers, that's been the main focus, and that's the reason why we established. We need to make sure we have very efficient corridors, not only for transporting goods in and out, but also on the transit basis, as Felix mentioned. I will take another angle as well. Since we are at the business school and we are located in Kirkenes, we see very much that there is a demand from the business side for good stuff. So we have changed our focus also more to educate people. So access to education on the remote part is something we have been active in Kirkenes. We see there is more demand for that, specialized education in our direction. And we also see there is a need to get people into more thinking of innovation and entrepreneurship, as we do have a focus on at the business school. And we also want to do that more in the Arctic context. So we are starting to develop courses in that together with indigenous youth. And we also started to do that with Russian partners. So we need to, in a way, like Felix mentioned, how can we give the indigenous population an access to this route, and how can we stimulate that entrepreneurship? How can we get these entrepreneurs out, the young entrepreneurs out? And we had some during the last 2-3 days at the IMF Dolag, seeing very good future thinkers and future business leaders have those interest and how we can engage them to go this direction. That's something we are very much into at the moment. Another thing that Felix mentioned was a bit about this operational risk, the risk of something that goes wrong. This is something also that we are very much concerned about. There is all the risk that takes place we need to mitigate here. There is an increase of more and more natural disasters we see coming in. So there very much increased the wildfires in the Arctic, large land, severe weather conditions. This is something that will impact the shipping, and we need to see how we can mitigate that by strengthening the preparedness systems, joint collaboration on the emergency response side. And we also saw that in the pandemic that how vulnerable small societies, small municipalities are if something goes wrong. The same if you have a shipping accident. So the concern of demographics, keeping people there by giving education and keep people in the houses along the coast is so important for the future. We think and we need to take part in that. This is the only way we can keep people out there, and connectivity, as Heida mentioned, is important. The new Arctic Connect cable is one good example of how we can to create that space. If you have access to the connectivity in the remote spaces of the Arctic, like in Sakharapoluk, we are doing some projects on that. So important. Green shift, Felix mentioned that we see that. So we're looking much into that. We see there will be a change. We have discussions in Bodø several days looking at hydrogen, blue, yellow, other type of production of ammonia. How can we get this over to take part in the shift of moving from fossil fuel to fossil-free fuel is important for us. And finally, at our point in Kirkenes, we are sitting together with all the institutions like the Barents Secretariat. We have the Capital Fund for East Europe. We know we'll have a Chamber of Commerce office there. We are trying to see how we can increase and get the business people to do more cross-border, and that's been a struggle for us. We need to establish that, like in the investment protocol, take it into action. We need to see how we can get the possible for more investments. We can use this capital fund we have in Norway, not only in Serbia and Macedonia, but also in Russia, that we had the attention for. And least not last, we need for us to get more capital fund to the Arctic, and how can we create that and attract the good investment? That's something very much into. So I think I will stop there. And you see, I went a bit out of the shipping sector as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Stokvik. I fully agree with you that Arctic needs more investment, more innovations to come. But what I especially liked in what you said was your notion of talent and education. We need to engage Arctic people into those innovative developments and into that growth. But also, we should probably work on creation an attractive environment for more and more talent from other parts of the world to come to live and thrive in Arctic. Thank you very much again, Mr. Stokvik. And I can see that we have His Excellency Nikolai Korchunov, who has joined the session. So I would like to pass the word to him. And Your Excellency, while you were not with us yet, there have been a number of questions raised about the geopolitical context in the Arctic and how it affects the business development. And obviously, many people are wondering what's going to be Russia's chairmanship in the Arctic Council about in the next couple of years. So we would really appreciate hearing from you your thoughts. And if you could just link that to the business development and what, in your view, needs to be done to support the sustainable growth of the business in the Arctic. The screen is yours, Your Excellency.
Good morning or good afternoon, dear Alexei, dear colleagues, friends. First of all, I would like to thank the authors for a very interesting, eye-opening report on the future of the Arctic. In this regard, I would like to note the importance of the predictive studies that allows us to form a vision of the Arctic in the future 2050. The prepared study is a good contribution to these common efforts. It is important that the study has an international dimension, which allows for a more balanced and holistic vision of the region. At the same time, we perfectly understand that the life often turns out to be more diverse and complex, making its own judgments to the drawn-up schemes. Bearing that in mind, one can't disregard a realization of a mixed scenario that would combine elements from the mentioned in the studies for scenarios. It's obvious that the existing complications and uncertainties do not allow predicting a future scenario with a high probability. In my opinion, the most attractive of the scenario in this report is the Renaissance scenario. But as the life always proves, the ideal case remains ideal in theory. In this regard, it obviously makes sense to work out the probability of the particular event's occurrence, identifying factors that determine the corresponding development of its inhibition, including the correlation of goals and objectives of the main players and stakeholders in High North, the level of economic and social development of countries, the settlement of bilateral issues, including the delimitation of maritime spaces, the level of trust and credibility between the state of interaction and relations development between the countries, including on security issues. So it's mentioning the preconditions for such scenario seems to be very important. All these factors in turn determine the parameters and the quality of Arctic governance, its compliance with the challenges of today and the future, which is largely a a derivative of the national Arctic policies and strategies of key players. It seems for me that it is difficult to view the task drawing the scenario through the angle of the fourth industrial revolution, which all 8 Arctic states are entering already. The role of the disruptive technologies in development of the Arctic. Then it is also worth on focusing on the future role and the current and future role of the Arctic as a contributor to the green shift and the energy transition. Arctic as its role in terms of providing resources, rare metals, materials, energy and transport solutions for that in the future. Also, and with that arriving another task to place the future Arctic in the context of the global development and such scenario, but by using also maybe in a more extent manner the quantitative methods of analysis in this regard. For example, analyzing the Arctic states economy in high north. For example, Alaska, if we take Alaska for example, we could observe the decline in GDP during recent 2 or 3 years. What will be the projection of that in the future? But that is the different with the development of the Russian zone of Russian zone in the Arctic. So I mean that kind of analysis could create a much more color and nuance pattern of the future of the Arctic. And with this, I would like to encourage you to not to stop, but to continue with this excellent start which was demonstrated by Skolkovo and the foreign partners from Norway, and which is also part of the Arctic. And I would also like to recommend Skolkovo to establish the partnership with the Arctic, which to us is very important institution. As for the role of geopolitical factors, of course, Arctic is not existing in isolation. We could say more that Arctic is globalizing. Arctic becoming more and more important in terms of the geopolitical trends and development. That's why, of course, everything within the geopolitical could its influence on the Arctic. For example, when we see the difficulties and complex relations between the Arctic states or with Arctic states and in other countries, and attempt to project these differences even on the Arctic, with that arriving the difficulties for the Arctic cooperation in terms of atmosphere, in terms of the dialogue and so on. Of course, the role of inclusiveness in approaching and addressing Arctic development is important. We have the Arctic Council as a preeminent forum for intergovernmental cooperation, and that is mostly dealing with the issues of so-called soft security or soft powers. It is all to do with this environmental protection and other risks, and social and challenges. But the military situation is not within the Arctic states, and we are observing the such development which we would like not to welcome in the high north. Mainly it's with the internationalization of the military activities of non-Arctic states in high north recent time. Of course, for that we need to find the right place for the dialogue on that issues between the Arctic states. As for the forthcoming Russian chairmanship, we will make our focus on the sustainable development, environmentally, economically, and socially balanced. And of course, we will, in a responsible manner, to provide on the agenda all the issues we are agreed with the Arctic states before, and those are interests which are shared. And with that, we would like to place people of the Arctic on the first place of our on our program, to make the Arctic Council closer to the people, to gap the disconnect, if I could say like that existing, because the Arctic Council, that is the machinery, that is the format of the representative of the governments. It means that my role and the role of other senior Arctic officials, that is the derivative of the state function delegated to the Arctic Council, and to make Arctic Council meeting the needs of the Arctic inhabitants, including indigenous peoples. That is the something we will promote during our forthcoming chairmanship. So I will maybe stay here and will be ready to then intervene or answer any questions if there be any. Thank you, Alexei.
Sure. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And thank you very much for your very kind words about our report. And we are very pleased you have read it. And obviously, we will follow your recommendations not to stop on this, because actually this report was meant to be an invitation to the discussion. And so we are going to keep this discussion going, engaging more and more people to join this discussion and hear more and more perspectives and contributions. And yes, and it was very important, I'm sure, for everyone to hear the priorities of the Russian chairmanship in the next couple of years. But one thing I thought I would comment is that sometimes we overcomplicate things, and obviously Arctic is pretty complex phenomenon, so it's natural to think in a complex way about it and complicate things. But sometimes it's good to take a step back and probably think about something simple. And the thing that you mentioned, the trust, sounds like a very simple word, the trust between the parties. And probably that is the key for all the concordance we can build among the Arctic states and among all the stakeholders. And that's probably the key to the future of the Arctic, the sustainable future of the Arctic. So thank you very much for mentioning trust. And we will definitely think about the way how the trust between the partners can be built in such a complex and controversial environment. And one more thing, you mentioned Industry 4.0 and all those innovative technologies and shift towards a completely different economy. And with this, I would like to invite Mr. Tero Varuste, who is Regional Director of Nordics in ICI. And basically, ICI is the company that brings space technologies to take something much bigger than a bird's eye view on the whole planet, and not only the Arctic, but Arctic in particular. So I would like Mr. Varuste to tell us what do you actually see from up there, and how you can say whether Arctic is a playground for innovative high-tech companies like yours, and do you see more interest in your industry to the Arctic, or it's just you? So, Mr. Varuste, please, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation and for the introduction. You asked me what do we see? Well, obviously we see everything. Of course, our satellites can see through clouds and can see through darkness because of the cutting-edge technology. So, but let me first touch upon a bit on His Excellency's presentation and the discussion which has taken place just throughout the past couple of weeks. So, as we recall, Finland has traditionally been a country whereas many important decisions between the great powers of the world have been made. And as everybody recalls, in 1975 there was a historical event with the European Security Conference, and there will be the 50th anniversary of this conference in 2025. And just last week, our president, Mr. Niinistö, explored the idea of rejoining in 2025 in terms of Arctic flavor, and he has invited initially such a conference to take place, and also there is an invitation for the presidents of Russia and presidents of United States to meet again in Helsinki. So we are very much looking forward to these opportunities and events. He just addressed the black carbon issue yesterday in an event with the Finnish Arctic Society, which is of high importance for the Arctic developments. I will touch upon the opportunities of climate change, especially in the Arctic, what has happened and how the space solutions could help and advance those developments. So as we recall, just last year we had substantial heat waves all around the Arctic. The temperatures are 2 degrees higher compared to what they were 150 years ago, and in the Arctic areas even much more higher. We had 22 weather disasters in the United States. They killed close to 300 people over there. The cost for those was, and the tropical systems, was $40 billion. In Norway, we had 2 landslides in the Russian Arctic, in Siberia. We see new sinkholes taking place with great costs and changes for the whole society. So these are events which have taken place just very recently, and actually not directly related to the climate changes, the volcano eruption which is taking place in Iceland, and we have also looked into that very carefully with our satellite constellation and doing great collaboration with our colleagues in Iceland on that. So what's happening in space? Sputnik 1 was the first satellite in 1957. So it's close to 70 years ago when the first satellite was launched, and the mankind has launched more than 10,000 satellites since then. And about 6,000 of those are still existing, and around 1,000 of those are used for Earth observation. So it's quite a significant amount. But the recent developments have been remarkable because just within the past 2 years, more than 2,500 satellites have been launched, and there is more to come. And ICEYE has launched 10 satellites year to date. and the constellation can monitor around the world because we have a great frequency for the bypasses. One satellite goes around the globe in 96 minutes, and 10 satellites have been launched, and there is more to come. So this is like the new space approach, where we have the new types of opportunities compared to like the old satellites, which are still working, but much more like a higher cost to use, and yet again they don't provide that much of opportunities for the shots. Well, the government and military satellite constellations, of course, they create a separate sector. We are all aware that the US, the Russian Federation, and China are the most active ones on this. However, for instance, in Kiruna in Sweden, there is an expectation to be able to have the launch capability in 2022 for the Nordics. So there are developments in the Nordic countries here as well. So the synthetic aperture radar technology is special because it gives an opportunity to see through clouds, see through darkness, and that is something which is of high importance in the Arctic as well. We are all recall that half of the year in the Arctic is very dark, so optical images cannot be used with a similar way. And we have conducted research in collaboration with the Finnish Meteorological Institute in order to see how the ice develops in the Arctic areas. And that's, by the way, available through our website. So I encourage everybody to have a look into Ice website on this particular issue. It's a very, very interesting one. So that's like a practical solution of the satellite images for the Arctics. When we look into the opportunities of the satellite images in the Arctic, obviously the environmental issues, but also the infrastructural issues are of high importance. So we have this dialogue between the industry as well as the environment, and trying to balance the things. So the satellite images can be a great help for this development to really balance and to assess different types of changes in the environment. We call this like the interferometry technology, where you can really see what happens. So for instance, with the Icelandic volcano, we looked into that for 2 weeks in advance. And when you take images and make a comparison of what's happening with the interferometry, you can really foresee what's coming up. So this gives great opportunities for the sustainable developments in the Arctic. So Finland is available for the international collaboration, and ICEYE has the name of ICEYE, and it comes from the Arctic, as the initial business idea of ICEYE was really the Arctic ice. But obviously these satellites go around the globe, so there's a lot of other opportunities as well. But still, ice is nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varuste. Ice is really nice. I fully agree with you. And thank you very much. I think that what you're doing is great, because you help business and policymakers and governments make better informed decisions. And it's not only about what has already happened, but what is going to happen. And that's actually the way how your technologies and solutions help us work with the future, and that's really great. And I also hope that your example of your very successful business in the Arctic will inspire more and more companies from digital telecommunications to come to Arctic and do their business as well, because I'm sure that there is a huge space for this kind of technologies in the Arctic. And but you've obviously touched upon the question of the climate change and environmental issues, and that's kind of a natural bridge to our next speaker. I would like to invite Mr. Jan Dusik from the WWF Arctic program to share with us his opinion on what's going on in the natural environment of the Arctic. And here is definitely it will be very interesting to hear whether, Mr. Dusik, you believe that business can grow in the Arctic without damaging the environment and the ecosystems. So please, Mr. Dusik, the screen is yours, actually.
Thank you very much, and congratulations on the comprehensive and appealing report. And I agree with Tero Vaurasta that ice is nice, but unfortunately it's quickly disappearing, and that's why we are looking also into the future. I have 5 points that I wanted to share. First is that it's important to look at the long-term vision and to see the short-term gains in that long-term vision, and that's where such scenario planning is very useful. We are just coming out of the summit of President Biden, which discussed the climate commitments of different countries, and that also counts for the Arctic. And basically, the speed and the extent of climate change means that we cannot afford additional pressure for the Arctic people from unsustainable exploitation. So we need to find a way which reflects on what's coming with climate change and how that enables doing business in the Arctic. That brings me to the second point. Yes, clean economic development is possible and is important in the Arctic. We need to find a way how to find solutions to competing uses, such as between extraction of minerals and fishing industry, but many more. We need to clearly promote zero carbon solutions, to remove fossil fuel subsidies, and to focus on what can be the competitive advantage of the Arctic, the uniqueness and the advantage for the global markets as well. Applying environmental impact assessment and strategic environmental assessment to projects, looking at transboundary impacts, ensuring the participation from the stakeholders and the local residents is important, and including the resilience of the projects into the future, again linking with the climate change. A lot was mentioned about shipping. Of course, that requires global solutions in terms of shipbuilding and shipping fuels. Also, the ships operating in the Arctic are flying different flags, and that's where global solutions for clean Arctic shipping is needed, combined with innovation that comes from the shipping industry itself. Third point is about precaution. Of course, we need to set some boundaries. We see that the fisheries moratorium, which was agreed, is probably a wise approach, and we want to see it being implemented. Another question is whether we should need a similar approach to the mining in the seabed, which also contains risks, many of which we don't know. And we are also working in WWF on something called ARCNet, which should be defining priority areas for biodiversity and basically seeing what can be the coexistence with business operations. Finally, I would mention the governance issue, which is important to be fit for purpose for the changing conditions, and that's where, of course, the Arctic Council and the Russian chairship of the Council will play an important role, together with a strategic plan that hopefully will be completed in the Arctic Council, and that will correspond more to the long-term vision that could relate to the different modeling. And the green opportunities from the current difficult situation with COVID pandemic, and the opportunities for green recovery and green jobs would be useful to look at. One important thing is that the indigenous peoples' engagement is vital, and I think that from now on they should be invited to every table where the Arctic future is discussed. So, in conclusion, yes, sustainable business in the Arctic is possible, but it will not be achieved by just adding the word sustainable after we have spoken about business as usual. And thank you again.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Dusek. I think, WWF is famous for being a very good partner for the business in helping the business to become more and more sustainable. And what we understand is that, and not many people really know that you are not just an environmentalist organization, you are a huge think tank, and everything you do is scientifically grounded, and that what really helps business to become more and more sustainable and act in a more sustainable and responsible way. And thank you very much. Your point is taken. We will next time definitely invite representatives of indigenous peoples. And actually, we tried, but we failed this time. But we will definitely do better next time. And it was not on purpose that we omitted them from this discussion, of course. And with this, I would like to pass the word to Ms. Anne Ranneli-Konturi from the city of Oulu to share her views on what are the major challenges of the Arctic cities for the next 20, 30 years, and what the role of the business in overcoming those challenges. What business can do for the Arctic cities to be better off in the next 20, 30 years. So please, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to be here today to join this discussion. I give my regards from the city of Oulu, which is the 5th largest city in Finland, with 200,000 people. We say that we are a city of contrasts, standing bravely on the northern edge and heading for a cultural climate change. This was given as a promise in our European Capital of Culture 2026 bid yesterday. Our city is also one of the founding members in Arctic Mayors Forum, a network of leaders from northern local governments within the 8 Arctic nations. We aim to collaborate for the better future, but also to advocate the interests of local people and communities in Arctic nations. Therefore, I have been very pleased today when I have been listening to this discussion and reading these scenarios and reports, which all recognize the role of people and cities in building the future. Anyway, we all see that picturing the future is not easy. And as scenarios very well describe, there are a number of trends that may act as a driver of any future developments. For example, if you look at the Arctic Mayors Forum cities, you can see that they are all different. They have different historic, geographical and socio-economic conditions and needs, and all this will affect their choices for the future. But what we share is that even very different from each other, we are all living organisms of communities, and therefore we are the ones who can provide the access to the people in these areas. The pandemic that has altered every aspect of urban life within a year or two. It has devastated especially the retail, tourism industry, culture, and even industries, which are all very important source of income and jobs in Arctic cities. Cities and regions all over the world have been in a front line responding to the pandemic. And we will be in front line also when building back and better, I hope. So I would only say that let's not waste a good crisis, but use it as a game changer. It's truly the time to work together now. I think the main question is that how do we recover sustainably while still keeping everyone on board? There is no Arctic future without one important resource, the competent people and especially young people. We need to ask ourselves what would make young people and families to choose the Arctic as their partner in life. We need people but we also need to ask, are we truly ready to welcome new people also outside the Arctic and integrate them to our communities? For the future, we need investments in human capital. We need sustainable, well-functioning, lively cities and communities. We need good education opportunities, exciting free time, and above all, we need high-quality jobs, attracting also new people outside of the region. Therefore, we need entrepreneurial mindset and investors, investments, connectivity. After all, sustainable growth and jobs are made in local innovative companies in a close dialogue with local communities, as said before. Moreover, people and leaders of this region, we need to be on the driver's seat when building the future of the Arctic together. And this is reasoning behind the Arctic Mayors Forum. Mayors want to have a say. What we see is an empty observer seat in Arctic Council, and we would like to occupy that. We were very happy to hear that that it was said that the Russian chairmanship will put people on the focus. We would like to do that as well, and we urge all international governance stakeholders to create mechanisms to consult and involve local governments in the Arctic future. So to end, my desirable future in the Arctic is that this region becomes the most resilient region in the world through pursuing a good balance between social, economic, environmental, and cultural standards in all development policies. I really like that sustainable mindset mentioned by Alexandra. We also need a collaborative, borderless mindset along with it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Ranali Kontori. Yes, and thank you very much for mentioning that we paid a special attention to the northern cities because with the average urbanization rate in the Arctic at around 70%, which is probably not the most immediate thing that comes to mind to most of the people in the world. Sometimes they see Arctic as just a natural environment, but in fact it's pretty urbanized, and obviously the future of the Arctic is hugely dependent on the way how the city is going to be developing. And the experience of Oulu is very impressive and probably exemplary to more cities, to other cities to take after. And probably we will see more and more sustainable and livable and cities in the future who will be able to attract talent, more and more talent. And I believe that this is one of the most important things that the cities can do, attract more talent to the Arctic. Well, thank you very much. With this, we conclude the presentation part of our session, and from what I can see, there is a very intensive exchange of question and answers between the participants and the speakers, and I hope that all the questions have already been asked and answered. If not, please go ahead. You can still do it now. And what I would like to do now is to invite all the participants to vote for one of the scenarios, but not the one you like, not the one you prefer to happen, not the one you kind of think is the best for the Arctic, but the one that you think is most likely to happen. So you can scan this QR code, and it will take you to the menti.com, where you can enter the code, and the code is 51363565. I hope we can see the code here as well. So there will be a quick. There's a very simple question, and please vote for just one scenario that you believe is most likely to happen. And I hear that we have a question for His Excellency Ambassador Korshunov. So can we please have him on our screen? And what is the question? Where's the question? Yes, here the question. Your Excellency, what is the Russian view on a new strategic partnership with Norway to work together for responsible and sustainable development of natural resources in the Arctic? Is there a possibility of a huge project like Stockman again? That's the question.
Echo the comments of the Major of Oulu on the importance of the cities. It is obvious that we are observing urbanization trend in the Arctic. That's why we are supporting the multi-layered cooperation and networking, bringing together different stakeholders and players, also the municipalities, locals. Russia proposed in the future to come the cooperation with the Arctic Council, put region-to-region cooperation, which is not there. We think that it is important to focus us on the smart city development. That be something which encourage the youth to stay in the north. Concerning the question on the potential for the economic cooperation, first of all, I'd like to mention that I have an optimistic view on the future development in the Arctic, and especially of the Barents region, which we consider as a most powerful and most equipped. That is the engine of the Arctic cooperation, and in the Arctic and the Barents region, which bring together Norway and Russia, and of course we are very positive looking at any economic cooperation on sustainable principles with Norway in the future, even a strategic partnership, and having in mind the knowledge and the competences of Norway in the exploring the Arctic resources in a sustainable way. So it's of course we are very supportive to that, and we even I could say more that we should see the way to moving in this direction through the multi-supporting measures. We should be focused and aimed at enhancing the competitiveness of the Barents region, because we see that now on a global scale, it is the competition of the competitions of the region, and how we will interact bilaterally, trilaterally, or within the Barents Council with all the stakeholders depends how this region will be in the future competitive. That is very, very important. And then we, last but not least thing I would like to say is that, of course, Arctic is the badly hit by the climate change region. That is a matter of fact. But we think that Arctic, and we regard Arctic as an enabler in terms of providing the green shift and the energy transition. And in this regard, the Arctic role will be increased. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I really like the point about the competitiveness of the region, because, well, actually, it's a business concept of competitiveness, but when you put the competitiveness of the region as a priority, then probably the differences between the parties should disappear for the greater good. And thank you very much again for everyone, and for your first of all the speakers. On behalf of the audience, I thank you very much again, and thank you very much for all the questions that have been asked and answered in the Zoom chat. And now I would like us to take a look what our survey tells us. Can we please see the results of our Menti survey on the screen here? Yes, here it comes. Okay, so we have 11% for, not 11%, it's 11 votes, I'm afraid. Yes, 11 votes for Age of Discovery, 7 votes for Renaissance, and 2 votes for Romanticism, and 0 votes for Dark Ages. So basically, most of the people believe in something between Age of Discovery and Renaissance. And I would appreciate if any of the speakers would like to comment on what this picture actually tells us. Anyone, please? Who would like to share a thought? Just a quick thought, 1 or 2 minutes. Yes, Your Excellency, please.
Thank you so much. First of all, as I mentioned before, I not believe in any of the four scenario. I think that I believe in a merging of scenarios, something in between, and that is something what these polls showed us. But most important is that half of the people they are believing in a Renaissance scenario, and that is the optimist is very important. Age of Discovery, that is also important. That will be the driving force. Of course, we will ask us whether that kind of polling is the representative in terms of those who are participated and whatever. But that giving us impetus, even Skolkovo and Norwegian institution to continue with their efforts on constructing the futurological view of what is we are facing in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I saw Ms. Leon wanted to comment on this picture, so please, Polina, the screen is yours.
Just a quick comment. That actually, I was the one who voted for the Age of Discovery. Actually, I like more the Renaissance scenario, but I believe that in a short period of time, maybe next couple of years, it would look more likely the Age of Discovery, just because it's very difficult, to develop a working policy, an efficient working ESG policy, just that would suit everyone, that would fit the business activity, and so we will have quite a long. I think that we will have quite a deep discussions. There are very much participants in this would be involved in this discussion. So I believe that probably in 5 years we will shift to the Renaissance scenario, but we need to put our best efforts to discuss and to ensure this Arctic policy would be efficient for major stakeholders. So
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And I see one last raised hand. Ms. Ranali Kontori, please, the voice of Oulu.
Thank you. Of course, me as well, I would like to move towards this vision of a new renaissance. However, I also believe that we need to go along the path of realism first. And SDGs was mentioned before by Rosatom, and I think that using the framework of sustainable development goals as a path to the development, we would actually find our ways closer to Renaissance. So in our city, we will try to localize those objectives to our strategy and implementation.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So with this, I would like to conclude our session, and I would like to thank everyone, first of all, our speakers and our participants, the audience, for the participation, for such an inspiring exchange of views and perspectives and ideas. And I think that we are going to keep this discussion open, because what was said is that we need to talk more, to come up with a common vision, to come up with common rules of the game, how we work in the Arctic, how we work together. And I think that there is a huge space for improvement of what we've got here now. And I think that's a very interesting concept of moving through the age of discovery to renaissance. And I think this is probably the most realistic way of moving forward. And thank you very much again. Everyone who didn't have a chance to read the report, please do so. Please visit ARCTIC-2050.info. There you can upload your papers, if you have some, to share, because we want this to become a real knowledge hub of the discussions around the future of the Arctic. And you also can post your questions there. Some questions have not been answered, and we will try to make sure that they will reach out to the speakers and experts, and will be followed up later. And with this, thank you very much again, everyone, and let's call it a session. Thank you and goodbye, and see you in the next discussions. Thank you very much.